My name is Hannah Caldwell. I am 29 years old, and I live in a quiet neighborhood just outside Denver, Colorado. 3 months ago, I almost died in a house fire that started while I was asleep. The flames took everything I owned, and I spent 7 weeks in the burn unit, going through 4 separate skin grafts. The doctors told my family they weren't sure I would ever walk the same way again. But somehow, after all of that, I survived. Then the fire investigator came to my hospital room and told me something that made my blood run cold. The fire wasn't an accident. Someone had set it on purpose. And when I finally discovered who that person was, I felt my entire world collapse under my feet. Before I tell you the whole story, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. Your support means everything to me. Now let me take you back to how this nightmare began. That night started like any other Tuesday. I had come home late from the elementary school where I work as a second-grade teacher. My husband, Mark, was already in the kitchen making dinner. He kissed my forehead the moment I walked through the door, and our 4-year-old son, Oliver, came running toward me with a crayon drawing in his tiny hand. "Mommy, look what I made for you," he said, beaming up at me. It was a picture of our family standing under a big yellow sun. I hugged him tight and told him it was the most beautiful drawing I had ever seen. We had dinner together, watched a cartoon with Oliver, and then Mark and I tucked him into bed. Around 10 at night, Mark kissed me goodnight and told me he had to drive out to a job site 2 hours away early the next morning. He's a construction supervisor, and these trips happened all the time. I didn't think anything of it. I kissed him back, told him to drive safely, and curled up under the covers. I had no idea that would be the last normal night of my life. I fell asleep quickly. Oliver was already at my mother's house that weekend for a sleepover she had been planning for weeks, so the house was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. I don't remember what time it was when I first smelled the smoke. It was thin at first, almost sweet, like someone had burned toast downstairs. I rolled over, half awake, thinking Mark had come back early. Then I heard a sound I will never forget. A low, heavy crackling, like something alive was eating through the walls. I opened my eyes, and the entire hallway outside my bedroom was glowing orange. I jumped out of bed. My feet hit the floor, and the wood was already hot. Smoke was rolling in under the door, and when I touched the doorknob, it burned my hand so badly that I pulled back and cried out. "Oh me God! Oh me God!" I kept whispering it over and over, like I was trying to wake myself up from a dream. I ran to the window and tried to open it, but it was stuck. I banged on the glass. I screamed for help. The smoke was getting thicker, and my lungs were burning. I grabbed a small lamp off the nightstand and hurled it at the window as hard as I could. The glass shattered, and cool air rushed in, but with it came a roar of flames from below. The whole first floor was already gone. I climbed onto the window ledge. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold on. I looked down, and the drop looked impossibly far. But behind me, the fire was already crawling through the bedroom door. I closed my eyes, whispered a prayer for Oliver, and I jumped. I don't remember hitting the ground. I don't remember the neighbors running toward me. I don't remember the sirens or the paramedics or the ride to the hospital. Everything after that moment is black, like someone had reached into my mind and ripped those memories out. My sister, Rachel, told me later that the first thing she saw when she got to the hospital was the doctors running my stretcher down a hallway, and she thought for sure I was already dead. She said my skin looked like paper. She said I wasn't breathing on my own. They took me straight into surgery. The burns on my legs and back were severe. My right shoulder had been dislocated when I landed. I had a concussion, 3 cracked ribs, and smoke damage in my lungs. Rachel told me later that the doctor came out after the first surgery and told the family to prepare themselves. He said there was a real chance I wouldn't make it through the night. She said my mother collapsed in the waiting room, and Mark had to catch her before she hit the floor. Mark, she said, didn't leave the hospital once. He slept in the waiting room chair. He held my hand between surgeries. He prayed so hard that his voice gave out. He donated blood when they ran low. He kept telling the doctors, please, please save her. She's my whole world. For 6 days, I was in a medically induced coma. When I finally opened my eyes, everything was blurry. My throat was raw from the breathing tube. I couldn't move my legs without pain shooting through my whole body. But the first thing I saw was Mark sitting next to my bed, his eyes red and swollen, his hand wrapped around mine. Hannah, he whispered. Oh, thank God. Thank God, baby. You're awake. He was crying so hard he couldn't speak. And in that moment, looking at him, I knew one thing for certain. This man loved me. He would walk through fire for me. There was no doubt in my mind. But then I looked past him, and I saw my family standing in the hallway. My mother was wiping her tears, yes. My sister was trying to smile at me, yes. But there was something strange about the way they were looking at Mark. Their eyes were cold. Their jaws were tight. And when Mark turned to say something to my mother, she looked away from him, like she couldn't stand to see his face. Something was wrong. Something I didn't understand yet. But deep in my gut, I knew that the fire in my house was only the beginning of something much worse. 3 days later, a man in a gray suit came into my hospital room. He introduced himself as a fire investigator from the county. He pulled up a chair next to my bed, and the look on his face made my heart start racing before he even said a word. Mrs. Caldwell, he said carefully, we've completed the initial investigation of the fire at your home. I need to share some findings with you. I'm sorry to tell you this, but the fire was not accidental. Someone intentionally set it. The room went completely silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. What do you mean? I whispered. He opened a folder and pointed to a photograph. The fire was started in 2 separate locations on the first floor. We found traces of an accelerant near the back entryway and in the living room. This was done deliberately. Someone wanted that house to burn fast. My hands were shaking. Who would do that? Why would anyone do that? He looked at me with sympathy. That's what we need to figure out. We're already investigating, but I wanted to hear from you. Is there anyone who might have had a reason to hurt you? Anyone at all? Before I could answer, my mother stepped forward. Her voice was sharp and sure. Yes, she said. There is someone. I turned my head toward her, confused. Mom, what are you talking about? She didn't look at me. She looked straight at Mark. It was him. He did this. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Mom, stop. That's insane. But she didn't stop. She kept going. He was the only one who knew you would be home alone that night. He took Oliver to my house, so Oliver wouldn't be there. He left town conveniently. He has a life insurance policy on you. Don't you see, Hannah? He planned this. Rachel stepped up behind her, nodding. We've been talking, Hannah. It's the only explanation that makes any sense. My brother-in-law, Dave, crossed his arms. The guy is a snake. I never trusted him. Mark was frozen. He looked at my family with a kind of horror I had never seen on his face before. You can't be serious, he said, his voice cracking. Hannah, you know me. You know I would never. Oh my God. I can't believe you're doing this right now. The investigator looked at my family, then at Mark. Do you have any evidence to support these claims? My mother stood up straighter. He's lied to her before. He drinks. He gets angry. He wanted her gone so he could get her life insurance and marry someone else. That's all you need to know. The investigator sighed. Sir, he said to Mark, I'd like you to come down to the station with me. Just to answer some questions. It's standard procedure. Mark's face went white. Hannah, don't let them do this. Please. Baby, you know me. I tried to sit up, but the pain was too much. Don't take him. He didn't do this. Mom, stop it. Stop it right now. But my voice was weak, and my family was louder than me. The investigator stood up and motioned for Mark to follow. 2 police officers I hadn't noticed before stepped into the doorway. They didn't put him in handcuffs, but it didn't matter. They took him anyway. Mark looked back at me as he walked out. His eyes were full of tears, and he mouthed 3 words to me. I love you. And then he was gone. The door clicked shut, and I broke down. I sobbed into my pillow. My family gathered around me, patting my shoulder, telling me they were doing this to protect me. But I didn't feel protected. I felt betrayed. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare that nobody else could see. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the last 3 years of my marriage in my head. The way Mark had held me when I had a miscarriage 2 years ago. The way he had taken an entire week off work when Oliver had pneumonia. The way he had built a wooden swing in our backyard with his own 2 hands because I had mentioned once that I missed having a swing as a kid. A man who did those things was not a man who would set his own wife on fire. I knew it in my bones. And if Mark didn't do this, then someone else did. Someone who wanted me to think it was Mark. Someone who wanted my family to turn against him. Someone who had a real reason to want me out of the way. The next morning, I told my nurse I wanted to speak to the fire investigator again. When he arrived, I asked him to tell me everything. Every detail. Every piece of evidence. I said I didn't care if it took hours. I needed to understand. He told me the fire had been started with lighter fluid. He told me the back door showed no signs of forced entry, which meant whoever set it either had a key or knew exactly where we hid the spare. He told me the timing was deliberate. The fire had been set at 2 in the morning when the neighborhood was fast asleep and help would come too late. Whoever did this, he said, knew your home. They knew your habits. They knew when you would be alone. This was someone close to you. Someone close to me. Those words echoed in my head for days. I started thinking about everyone in my life. My coworkers at school, my neighbors. A parent who had complained when I gave her son a low grade. None of it made sense. None of them would do something like this. So I started looking closer. At my family. And the more I thought about it, the more a strange, sick feeling started to grow in my chest. My father had passed away 2 years ago. He had been a successful dentist, and he had left behind a good amount of money, along with a lake house in the mountains and a commercial property he had been renting out for decades. The will had split everything 3 ways, between my mother, my brother Ethan, and me. My sister Rachel had been cut out entirely because of an old family feud. And ever since then, something had been off with Ethan. He had started asking me questions about my will. He had hinted, more than once, that if something ever happened to me, he hoped I would leave everything to the family and not to Mark. He had said it as a joke, but it hadn't felt like a joke. I didn't want to believe it. He was my little brother. I had practically raised him when our mother had been working double shifts as a nurse. I had taught him how to ride a bike. I had helped him with his college applications. I had been the one who held him when he cried after his first big breakup. There was no way. There was no way he could do something like this to me. But the more I sat with it, the more something kept pulling at me. Little things, small things. The way he had been distant lately. The way his wife, Bethany, had stopped coming to family dinners. The way they had been fighting about money. Ethan had lost his job 6 months ago, and I knew he and Bethany had been struggling. I had even offered to help them. And he had refused. He had looked almost angry when I offered. 3 nights after the investigator told me the fire was intentional, my mother came to my hospital room alone. It was almost midnight. The hallway outside was quiet except for the low beep of monitors. She pulled the door closed softly behind her and sat down in the chair next to my bed. Her face was pale. Her hands were trembling in her lap. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw her. "Mom?" I whispered. "What is it? What happened?" She didn't answer at first. She just looked at me. Her eyes filled with tears. "Hannah," she said slowly, "I need to tell you something. And I don't know how. I don't know how to say this to you." My heart started pounding. "Mom, tell me. What is it?" She took a deep, shaky breath. It wasn't Mark. I felt the air leave my lungs. "I know, Mom. I've been trying to tell you for days. What changed your mind?" She closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek. "I overheard something. Last night. I stopped by Ethan and Bethany's house to drop off some of your father's old tools that Ethan had asked for. Bethany didn't know I had a key. I let myself in because I thought no one was home. but they were in the kitchen, and they were arguing. My whole body went still. What were they arguing about? I asked, even though part of me already knew. My mother opened her eyes, and I saw something in them I had never seen before. Pure, total devastation. Bethany said, Ethan, I told you not to use that much lighter fluid. You almost got caught. And Ethan said, she didn't die, did she? So what does it matter? And Bethany said, if she figures this out, we go to prison for the rest of our lives. And Ethan said, she's not going to figure anything out. Mark is going down for this. Everyone already thinks he did it. I couldn't breathe. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. My mother kept going, and now she was sobbing openly. I stood there in the hallway. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. It was my own son, Hannah. My own son talking about burning my daughter alive. And then Bethany said something else. She said, we need the money from the inheritance or we're going to lose the house. And Ethan said, as soon as she's dead, Mom will split her share between us. We'll have enough to save the house and start over. And I just stood there, Hannah. I stood there like a ghost. And then I turned around and walked out before they saw me. I was crying now too. My whole body was shaking. Mom. Oh God, Mom. I couldn't sleep last night, she said. I couldn't eat. I kept hearing his voice in my head. My baby boy. My baby boy tried to kill my baby girl. For money. For a house. He tried to murder you for money. She reached out and took my hand, and her grip was tight. Hannah, listen to me. I recorded it. I had my phone in my pocket. I didn't even think about it at the time. But when I pulled it out later, the recording was there. I have all of it. I stared at her. I couldn't find words. Everything I had believed about my family was shattering in real time. The brother I had raised. The brother I had loved more than anyone. The brother I would have given anything to. And he had poured lighter fluid in my home and struck a match while I slept because he wanted my share of a house. If he had asked me, I whispered through my tears, if he had just asked me, Mom, I would have given him everything. The lake house, the rental property, all of it. I don't need any of it. I have Mark. I have Oliver. I have my job. I would have signed it all over to him in a heartbeat. All he had to do was ask. My mother broke down. She put her head on my shoulder and wept. For a long time, neither of us could speak. We just held each other in that dim hospital room, two broken women trying to understand how love could turn into something so evil. Finally, I pulled myself together. I wiped my eyes. Mom, we need to go to the police. Right now. We need to play them that recording. We need to get Mark out of that police station. And we need to make sure Ethan and Bethany pay for what they did. She nodded. She didn't hesitate for even a second. I know. I'm ready. Whatever it takes. I don't care if he's my son. What he did to you, what he tried to do. No mother can protect that. The next morning, we met the fire investigator and two detectives at the station. My mother played the recording. The room went absolutely silent. One of the detectives actually put his hand over his mouth. When the recording ended, the lead investigator looked at my mother and said, Ma'am, you just saved your daughter's life twice. Within 48 hours, everything moved fast. The detectives got a search warrant for Ethan and Bethany's home. They found a half-empty bottle of the same brand of lighter fluid that had been used in the fire. They found receipts. They found text messages between Ethan and Bethany that laid out the entire plan. They arrested Ethan first, at his home, in front of his neighbors. Bethany was arrested at her workplace that same afternoon. Mark was released from police custody the next morning. When Mark walked into my hospital room, the first thing he did was drop to his knees next to my bed. He couldn't even speak. He just buried his face in the sheets and cried. I put my hand in his hair, and I cried with him. I never stopped believing you, I whispered. Not for 1 second. He looked up at me, his eyes red and raw. I know, he said. I always knew you knew. That's what kept me going in there. The trial took almost a year. I had to testify. My mother had to testify. The prosecutor played the recording for the jury, and I watched the faces of 12 strangers go from confused to horrified to furious. Ethan wouldn't look at me the entire trial. Not once. Bethany cried through most of it, but her tears weren't for me. They were for herself. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Ethan was convicted of first-degree attempted murder, arson, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 40 years in state prison. Bethany was convicted of conspiracy and accessory to attempted murder. She got 25 years. Neither of them will see the outside world for a very long time. The day the verdict came down, I sat outside the courthouse on a bench with Mark and my mother. The sun was setting. My mother was holding my hand so tight I thought my fingers might break. And she said something to me I will carry for the rest of my life. She said, "Hannah, I lost a son the day I pressed play on that recording. But I kept my daughter. And that's the only thing that matters." It's been almost a year since that verdict. Mark and I rebuilt our home on the same piece of land because I refused to let what Ethan did push me out of the life I had worked so hard to build. Oliver is 6 now. He still doesn't know the whole story. One day, when he's old enough, I'll tell him. I'll tell him that evil can wear a familiar face. I'll tell him that love and blood are not the same thing. And I'll tell him that the strongest person I ever knew was his grandmother, who chose truth over her own son because she loved her daughter more than she feared the pain. If you're watching this and there's someone in your life who makes you feel that low, sick feeling in your stomach, please listen to it. Your gut knows things your heart doesn't want to believe. The person who tried to kill me wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a criminal I had crossed paths with. He wasn't some random intruder, he was my own flesh and blood. And the scar from that truth is something I will carry forever. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it moved you, please give the video a like, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe to HeartPath Stories so you don't miss what's coming next. I read every single comment, and your words mean the world to me. Take care of yourselves, and never ignore that voice inside you. It might just save your life.